I'm Matthew, and this is my presentation on the Immortal Life of Henrietta, chapters 33 and 34. So, chapter 33 is the Hospital for the Negro Insane. It takes place in the modern day of this book, which is 2001. Quite a bit happens in this chapter. It's an important chapter. The main thing is Rebecca and Deborah go on a road trip to Crownsville, to the hospital in question in the title, and they're trying to find Elsie's medical records. Before they do that, Deborah wants to visit her father in prison, which he refuses to let her visit her, but he does have a change in heart. He now wants her to update him with what they find about the research she's doing into Henrietta's records. So Rebecca and Deborah, they get to the hospital. It's really surprising. The grounds of the hospital are super well kept and pretty. They go into the hospital. It's a different story. It looks abandoned. It's empty. They wander around until they find a room labeled medical records. And they go in the room. It's completely empty. Rebecca is shocked. Deborah is not happy. So Deborah storms out of there and she goes down the hall yelling for anyone to help her. A woman comes out, and they get redirected to a man named Paul Lurs, who's pretty happy to talk to them. So Paul explains that most of the records are actually just gone due to asbestos. The hospital buried them. But he does have some records. He goes back in a closet using the year that Elsie dies. He pulls out a stack of files, and he's actually able to find Elsie's autopsy report. Deborah is really, really excited. They pull up the report, and Deborah looks at the causes of death listed, which is epilepsy, respiratory failure, and cerebral palsy. And Deborah's really confused. She said, I really don't think she had all of those. Paul agrees. They also look at, there's also a photo of Elsie, and it's really disturbing. Her face is swollen, her tongue is sticking out, and her neck is like being pushed in a really abnormal, disturbing position. And Rebecca and Paul are just shocked because it looks terrible. And Deborah is so happy she has a photo of Elsie. So they put in a request to make a copy of those records. And while Paul is doing so, Rebecca finds a 1958 Washington Post article that goes over the conditions in the hospital. And there's some facts in there that really are not great. The hospital was over 800 patients past its capacity, and there were 225 doctors per patient. The death rate was much higher than the discharge rate, and instead of having toilets, there was a grate on the floor for them to go. They're doing experiments on the patients without their consent. They're drilling into their brain, and they would remove the fluid in the brain so they could get clearer x-rays. This could cause side effects of headaches, dizziness, seizures, vomiting, and the vomiting would last until the body refilled the spinal fluid, but this would end up causing permanent brain damage and even paralysis, and they believe that's what happened to Elsie. Despite how disturbing that all was, Deborah's still super happy to recover this information. So they end up leaving with their copies, and they spend the night at a hotel in Clover. So that's chapter 33. So most of the presentation is going to be on 33. That was a very important chapter. Quite a bit happened there. Chapter 34 is really them just spending the night in the hotel room and discussing the records, now also including the Henrietta records that Elsie had. So they go through the records together, and Deborah reads some of the records to her. Rebecca tries to type it up. They try to get a lot of work done. Rebecca thinks, okay, we're not going to be able to get that much done. Deborah's really determined. It's like, okay, I can help you if I'm reading. Deborah has a wild range of emotions during this. she goes from being really excited to finding something out, and then she gets really upset when she reads about how poorly Henrietta and Elsie were treated. Then Deborah gets really angry at Rebecca because she's reading one of the records and she says, "Don't put this word in your book." And Rebecca smiles because she thinks, okay, Deborah is being really protective of her family. She's a good family member. And Deborah doesn't think that's the reason why she's smiling. She gets really upset and she thinks she isn't going to keep the word out of the book. Deborah actually punches Rebecca pretty hard. I think like she slammed Rebecca against the wall, and she accuses her of working for John Hopkins. She says that she's doing this for money and she's being paid. And Rebecca's been pretty calm with any accusations Deborah has made. And this time, she's not having it. She just yells at her back this time, and that kind of puts Deborah in her place. Deborah eventually goes to bed. Rebecca pretty much stays up all night typing up the records, but Deborah would get up periodically through the night to make sure the records were okay because she's really protective of those. So that's chapter 34. Here's the photo of the real life characters, and that is my presentation. Thank you very much.